that the Mass of 1962 Missal is often called the traditional Latin Mass or Mass of the Ages. And would you say those are accurate terms?
Well, I would say that they are problematic terms. Let's go back to 1962. One would not have encountered terms such as the Mass of Pius V, the Tridentine Mass, the traditional Latin Mass, the Mass of the Ages, or any such thing. Nobody would know what you were talking about. There was only the Mass. And these terms have been invented only since the 1970s to distinguish the form of the Roman Rite as it existed before the Council, as opposed to the form after the Council. So that form then has also been described as the Mass of Pope Paul VI, the Mass of Vatican II, the Novus Ordo, and then Pope Benedict XVI in 2007, when he allowed a more liberal use of the older forms of the sacramental rites, then introduced two more terms.
Oh, yeah.
The ordinary form and the extraordinary form.
Which are kind of confusing terms.
Right. So, and admittedly confusing liturgical theology, but that's a different matter. I had heard, but I haven't been able to find it. I had heard that Pope Francis wanted the older form of the rite to be referred to as no longer the extraordinary form, but as the TLM, or traditional Latin Mass. So I haven't been able to find that, but somebody had said that to me. Okay, well, words are powerful and they have meaning, and I've never liked the term traditional Latin Mass because it implies that since it is a term only used to contrast with something else, that it is traditional to be contrasted with something that's not traditional. Moreover, it defines the liturgy principally by a language, since of course the Mass after the Council was done almost entirely in vernacular languages, which I think was not correct, but nevertheless, in fact. And so you have, what's the dominant takeaway from the older form of the Mass? The language, the fact that it was in Latin. But an example that I have given is this. Let's say that you have today a young Catholic, and he approaches the priest, and he might say, "Father, could we have a traditional Latin Mass sometime?" Okay. Well, let's go back 50 years in history, and there is a young Catholic approaching the priest, and he says, "Father, could we have a guitar folk Mass sometime?" Okay. Well, defining the Mass either by an instrument, a guitar, or by the language that the prayers are offered in, Latin, minimalizes what the Mass is. Reducing it to a guitar or a language, I think, is very inappropriate. So I don't care for the term traditional Latin Mass. I don't like the term Latin Mass even, TLM. I don't know precisely how to refer to it, so I usually say the older form of the Rite, or the preconciliar form of the Rite. But I would like to, be in step with what we are supposed to be saying now, if it's no longer extraordinary and ordinary forms. There is a book which I'd like to mention at the end of our conversation here for your viewership, and the author makes this point, that the form of the Roman Rite as it exists now, if offered correctly and well, is actually more traditional than the form of the Rite that existed before the Council and had for quite a number of years, as codified by Pope Pius V, and that to me is probably the most challenging assertion that can be made to a person who says, well, I prefer that which is more traditional. I would respond, oh, okay, so you prefer the Mass after the Second Vatican Council? Oh, no, absolutely not. Well, so that betrays an ignorance, quite frankly, of history and the way that the Mass has changed, developed, been modified, added to, subtracted to, and so on. Just to put it very bluntly, the liturgy of the Mass's institution, the Eucharistic liturgy institution, was the Passover of Jesus Christ, which was very, very different, though also very essentially similar to the Mass as we know it, right?
Yeah.
But, they didn't profess the Creed of Nicaea. They didn't sing the Gloria. There was no Latin. Nobody was wearing a maniple, and so on. So how do we get from that to the Mass of, the Middle Ages, Trent, to what we have today? It's very complicated, actually, history.